Welcome to Season 2 of the Strain Podcast, a Southgate Media Group production, where we talk all about Guillermo del Toro's horror fantasy series, The Strain. We are currently covering the series' second season on FX. I'm your host, Blaire Graves, Director of Social Media and Associate Editor at tvbinges.com, and with me is Kyle Tremblay, the Editor-in-Chief at tvbinges.com. You can find us on Twitter at BlairLovesTV and at KyleLovesTV. Remember, both Kyle and Blaire have an E at the end. And you can follow this podcast Twitter handle at TheStrainPod. Hi, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'd like to welcome everyone to a very special edition of the Melrose Place, Apocalypse podcast. I'm Kyle, and I'm joined by Blaire today to bring you all the hottest stories of apocalypse love and book acquisition. How are you today, Blaire?
I am fantastic.
I've already taken over the podcast with a more accurate podcast.
Yes. I just watched the Blood Moon for everybody else who did that. Now, I thought it was pretty fitting that there was an eclipse the same night that the Strain was on TV, so that was pretty cool.
I've got an idea for all you people who haven't watched The Strain yet. Stare at the sky for an hour. How about that? How about doing that instead of spending an hour of your life on this show?
Wow, you're salty today.
Oh my god. Blaire, I can't take it. I just can't take it.
What happened?
Wait.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, you go.
No, I just have to give my intro thing.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't even contain it until they dropped. I'm so upset at this show.
Okay, hold up.
Okay.
Let me do my thing so everybody knows what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
All right. Today we will be discussing Season 2, Episode 12, called Fallen Night, which was written by Bradley Thompson and David Weddle, who are writing partners. Most recently, Thompson and Weddle wrote Intruders, which was the episode in which Kelly breaks into Fett's apartment and tries to take Zach. So, now we can talk about it.
You mean one of the 25 episodes where that happened?
Yes, well, she actually got in that episode,
yeah.
Remember? And then they threw the thing at her face, and it hit her in the face, and her makeup came off, and Zach saw her for what she really is.
Okay.
And, yeah, that
Here's I'm just going to cut right to the heart of the issue that I have here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of watching a show about the apocalypse where nothing happens. Like, can we just agree, like, nothing is happening? Like, it's fine for a show to have setup episodes and, like, connective tissue episodes, but that isn't even close to what's happening here. This is the Strain operating as the Strain normally operates, doing absolutely nothing, even in the penultimate episode of a season. This is staggering to me, the level of storytelling incompetence that's going on right here. This is mind-blowing that we have now gone through like at least 4 or 5 episodes where nothing has happened. I mean nothing. Like just nothing. Like nothing is happening. This is a show about the apocalypse. Like how can this be? How can this show be on an hour a week and do less? It's amazing to me that how little is happening right now. It just boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind.
I would certainly say that this season has been problematic in its
disastrous
in its pacing and its tone and its storytelling methods. I'll agree with you.
It started good. This season started good. Like, for the Strain?
Yeah, no. See, all right.
Yeah.
I'm like we're about to have a war.
Okay.
This is my favorite episode of the season.
Oh my god. Okay.
But your complaints are the same complaints that I have in that I really do like this episode. I do not like it within the context of an apocalypse story, but I do really, really like this episode in terms of character development, the way everybody interacted. I liked the stories that were told in this episode, and I liked the characters that were with each other, and I liked the different activities that they all had to do. I just thought this episode as a whole was one of the most cohesive of all of them this entire season.
I have one question for you, Blaire.
What is it? Did I hit my head? Is that your question?
Have you lost your mind? Oh. All right. Well, let's start talking about it so we can get to this. Wow,
Grumpmaster Kyle up in here right now. I'm all positive, and you're like,
yeah,
you're bringing me down, man.
I'm Debbie Downer this episode.
You are Debbie Downer. It's because you didn't go look at the eclipse.
No, I looked at pictures of it on Twitter.
Blurry pictures taken from people's phones.
No, there are some good pictures.
Oh. Thanks for your sass, man.
I'm so upset. Not even at you. I mean, again, you've chosen to live on the bright side of life, and I commend you for that. I'm just telling you, this was awful. And okay, well, we'll get to it. Let's start talking about things. Let's get to it.
Well, okay. Straight up, right off the bat, Feraldo. This is one of my favorite episodes of Feraldo.
Wow.
You really?
I mean, you see where we're going with Feraldo, right? Like they're
they're telegraphing that it's like going to go in the Nazi way. Like she's going to accidentally become Hitler.
Yeah.
And which I'm still struggling to figure out how. I mean, I understand the dictatorship role in the realm of like Fett got arrested earlier this season by her Night Squad and like all that stuff. So I've seen like that problem happen. But in terms of like hating like an actual race of people that are actually humans and stuff like that, that seems very far-fetched to me to get to in the direction of genocide of actual humans. You know what I mean? So I understand what they're telegraphing, and they made it clear by making 4 different characters say something along those lines. But I don't know that they'll be able to realistically portray what they're telegraphing, if that makes sense, just based on the way they've written her previously.
Yeah, I mean, that end game is interesting enough to me. The fact that it's so obvious she's going to break bad and is already well on her way makes it less interesting. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm not rooting for her. I liked when Feraldo was the scrappy underdog. I liked having a member of the government who was competent. Mm-hmm. And now she's clearly gone power mad and is making her own rules and having her army. And, like, we all know, so you can't really root for her unless you're rooting for the vampires.
Right, no, I know. And I know I can't actually root for her, especially because, like, she's been in
she's allied with Palmer.
Right, but she doesn't realize that Palmer is allied with the vampires. So there is, like, still, like, but she doesn't have that information.
Yeah.
The thing that she did that was the most upsetting this episode was allowing her officers to take other people's stuff. Like, the tax thing, whatever, you can debate that all you want. I understand the idea of there being a tax on the people who can afford to give that money so that they can like, buy all the ammunition and weapons that they need, or the medication. Like, I understand that aspect of it. But actually, like, pilfering of people's stuff, I was like, Feraldo, you gotta step back, man. But
it's clear that's who the character is now. She's an insane person. She's the Hitler of the show now. Right. I mean, that's where we're headed. So it's like, okay, well, now the one character I was having a fun time rooting for has been made so unlikable that I can't root for her anymore. Like, we had so much fun when Feraldo imposed that tax, because it was like, okay, this is a crazy person thing to do, but it's also like rich people, and who cares about them, and she's trying to protect them. Great. But now it's like, okay, we've clearly entered the territory where the mayor is getting assassinated, and, I mean, who do you think killed the mayor?
I think that was a ploy by Eichhorst and or some vampires to frame Feraldo so that she would go to Palmer.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's probably correct.
Because she needs somebody who's powerful on her side, and Palmer is like the only powerful person in the world, apparently.
Yeah, sure. Did you like the introduction of a hard-boiled detective who's skeptical of her story and apparently is on loan from Criminal Minds?
That was pretty fantastic. That was ludicrous. And
so stupid.
Totally out of place.
So stupid.
And entirely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But I think, like, they introduced Kowalski, who's a relatively competent cop, or, like, at least bodyguard. So they're like, oh, well, we actually probably have to show law enforcement a little bit more. Okay, let's add this guy.
Yeah. I don't know how at this point we're adding more characters than we're losing. We're supposed to be like knee deep, or at least waist deep in the apocalypse by now, and yet the strain is running a net positive in terms of character ad loss, which is deeply strange. Like, at this point, we should be there should be a lot of turnover. We should be replacing characters that are killed with new characters, but instead we are just adding characters, and the only characters that are killed are, like, the mayor, like, tertiary characters.
Right.
So, yeah, just that detective. I mean, that was one of many what I would call diversions in this episode that I just don't understand how they can get screen time. I don't understand how a detective being introduced can get screen time.
They were trying to ruffle Feraldo's feathers, and they needed somebody to intimidate her.
But
like,
who are we supposed to be rooting for in that scene? What's the point?
Well, my whole thing about the Feraldo business in total, with this episode, the one thing that really got me, it's like, oh, look, we're having city council meetings, but we're not actually, like, stopping the apocalypse. Like, I couldn't, like, fathom the idea that they were, like, voting on other things or, like, dealing with other things when there's trash in the street and people going missing and the police are organizing to be able to take down all, I don't understand.
No, there are malls being overrun by vampires who kill everybody. And that happened, by the way, in, like, the 4th episode of the series. And we are now in what, like, the... how many episodes? Is it 25?
25th episode.
We're in the 25th episode of the season. I think it was the 4th where Matt, Kelly's boyfriend, was killed in a mall.
Oh, right, like a Sears.
Right. So he was killed in a Sears, and other people were killed. So in the 4th episode, vampires were taking malls. In the 25th episode, city council meetings are happening where non-vampire items are on the agenda, where an indictment means something.
Right.
Like, we saw, about 7 episodes ago, all the most powerful people in the city be mauled in the street by vampires, and yet we're still talking about reprimands, and she's being asked to turn in her letter of resignation? Right. Letter of resignation? This is the freaking apocalypse! This is... What, you're gonna, like, give it to her secretary? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
This is, like, and we're introducing detectives who are like, hey, I know in these times of chaos people are trying to profit, but not on my watch. It's like, yeah, bro, your watch should be the vampires.
Right.
Who are running rampant in the street and killing civilians by what I can only imagine is the thousands. There was a full-scale battle at Red Hook in the streets. And we're still having city council meetings where, like, this is what I mean, like, nothing is happening. Like, this is mind-blowing to me that nothing is happening. It's not even like the apocalypse is stagnated. It's like the storytelling is stagnated. Like, we don't even have the device of F and Nora trying to come up with the cure. Like, that was when the season had a little momentum, is when they were trying, when F was on his way to DC, right, and, like, stuff was happening, right? That's stuff happening.
But that was on the previously on. That was the best part. That was on the previously on of this episode, and they didn't bring it up at all.
Nope. Just to remind us of better times. Just to remind us of when this season was good.
Right.
Because it's like, when F was in DC, it's like, okay, he's trying to stop the apocalypse. I assume Palmer, once he gets wind of this, is going to try to stop him. We're building towards something that matters.
Right.
And if you look at an episode like this, there were probably 6 stories in this episode, and one of them mattered. One of them mattered in the big picture sense, and that was the Gus and Angel stuff.
Yes.
Because it involved Quinlan, and that's the one part of this episode I'm not going to argue with you on, because I enjoyed that. So.
Well, and I also think that was, like, some of the best material the Strain's ever done. And it's weird because, like, they've been pretty useless with Gus up until now, which is unfortunate because that guy, I think, gives a pretty... I can't remember his name right now. But, like, he gives a really good performance. He and Angel have really good chemistry. And I think it should be, like, the way... Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the way it is in the books, but it should be an interesting story of a street thug learning to be, like, the right-hand man of this vampire army. And, like, that's what he should be, but instead he's been, like, putting around in this restaurant for, like, 6 episodes. But then finally in this episode, he goes to a prison, he starts slaying vampires left and right, he accidentally gets a cop killed, but it's, like, kind of proves to him something he's got to learn as a leader, how to be a better leader.
Yeah.
Well, he gets his army, his badass army, and then he goes to Quinlan, and now he's going to have to face off against a Trekian.
Well, he's already 20 prisoners, but yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think that's good. I will agree too that at least it was the best scene of this episode. I'll also say that if you watch, and I am on the record as not a big Walking Dead fan, but if you watch, I think the season 4 Walking Dead episode where they're introduced to the prison, this storyline is like a deep discount store version of that, and that's not even that good. Like if like this was certainly the best part of this episode, but if we're going to contextualize it in TV, it's not that good. It's still like it wasn't. There was no like kick-ass action sequence. It was just sort of perfunctory. I mean, it's cool that Angel shot the guy with the shotgun, and it's I guess it's cool to see vampires killed for the 500th and 501st time, but like there was no horror involved. There was no stakes. No one thought they were going to die.
But there was something that doesn't happen that often on the strain. F not being able to shoot a rifle notwithstanding, that they don't show a lot of person-on-person violence, which I think is a little strange. I would think you'd see more of that in this story. You certainly see more of it in the books. And this was one of those really, not powerful, because as you're saying, it's sort of like a drugstore version of something.
Yeah.
The generic version of it. But one of the more effective person-on-person violence moments, I think.
Sure. I mean, I guess, we didn't really know the prisoner guy that was leading the group who got shot. It's like that's a character that was introduced.
No. When the prisoners killed the cop.
Oh, okay.
He had locked himself in the cell and then he got out, and Gus tried to actually do the right leader thing and say, no, don't kill him. He doesn't deserve to die. And the guys go and they attack him with a machete very violently.
Yeah. Right. And that was just foreshadowing for their eventual betrayal of Gus himself. Right. And then Angel got him, one shotgun blast got him right back in line.
Right. Which proves that Angel is boss.
Yeah. Which, again, it's like, that's good. It's all good. It's, again, not going to quibble with this, but it's like, what does that get? Like the overall thing got us. The only reason I'm excited about this plot is that it led into an eventual confrontation where now we have a third party involved in this never-ending book story. So at least we got someone else involved and now turned that into like a battle royale. And also gave some shading to Quinlan and what his motivations are, and that he's not working with Abe anymore because he gave the okay for Abe to be killed. It's unclear to me why, given that Palmer is very important to the Master's plans, and that they know Palmer, why isn't Quinlan just going to the meeting himself, is my question.
I believe that he doesn't want to reveal his hand of where he's at. Like, he's like a stealth guy. He's not just like he's not a diplomat.
Well, his very first move was confronting the Master face to face, and he intended to end it right there. And apparently for the last 5 weeks, he's just been in a hotel room. So if that's stealth, then I guess sign me up for stealth, because I could stay in a hotel room for 5 weeks and then tell my lackey to go confront with his prisoner army to go confront Palmer and steal the book, or Abe and steal the book. It's like, I don't know why Quinlan isn't involved in that. I don't know why he's just sitting around. I'm
having a very strange moment, I would like to say. Again, for our listeners who don't know, I've read all the books. I've been reading them since they came out, and Kyle reads them after every season, so he can catch up on what happened. So I think I literally just had a moment where I thought about a scene in the book and thought it happened in the show, but it didn't.
Oh.
Because that's what I was referring to with him being a stealth guy.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't know that.
No, yeah, I was just thinking about a scene. Like, oh, yeah, totally. And in my brain, it's all the actors, and I could see it in my head. Like, wait, that didn't really happen.
You have now conflated your fan fiction that occurs in your mind with the reality of the show.
Yeah, it's because they're so much better, and I'm not one of those people who says books are always better, blah blah blah. But they're just objectively better.
Yeah, they're objectively better, and so like the reason I like that story is that at least it ties into something and sets up a thing. But again, like all the prison business about the guard being killed and about the guy outside, it eventually ended up with Angel with all the other prisoners just dutifully walking into the school bus. Like there was no real, like, those are non-characters. They're just faceless drones now who are under Angel and Gus's command. Like again, it's like we're just killing time basically, and doing just our sort of just setting up this story, which again I don't understand why Quinlan needs these guys, but okay. I don't know.
He needs a daywalker, but he can walk around in the day.
Yeah, we've seen him in the day. So it made more sense with Vaughn, who we didn't see walking around in the day, who was Quinlan. By the way, on the Fox Press site, if you look up photos of of Vaughn, they're still labeled Quinlan.
Are they?
Yeah.
Because they decided like halfway through season 2 that they needed to change the actor or something. Yeah.
He was definitely Quinlan in the first season, and then they changed him to Vaughn.
See, that's really what I thought. Okay, I'm really glad. I'm so happy because in the first season I was so excited. It's Quinlan. I mean, I like this version of Quinlan in terms of how he looks and stuff, but he's functionally like just dumb. Like there's no purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I'm fine with retconning that and giving yourself a second chance. But what have they really done with Quinlan? He had a great intro, great.
He has a real bone sword.
Yes, he has a real bone sword, and he had like his first. He got out of a car at the end of one episode. He was heavily involved in the next episode. We got a lot of action. He recruited Gus, and then a solid month where nothing happens. Mm-hmm. Just nothing. And this episode again, he's sitting in a hotel room giving orders. Like if you're gonna rewrite the character, make him do something. Right. You've gone through all this trouble to betray your own storytelling in order for a purpose, and that purpose was to have a character sit around and do nothing. Like, I don't get it. Why? What about Vaughn, who was Quinlan, could not have done this?
Yeah.
Like that's my thing. Like, why do that if you're just not going to use the character?
I don't know if was it a casting thing. I haven't looked heavily into it. But I think they also just decided that they wanted to utilize Quinlan in the more Dampier way, which is like a day walker and a night walker, and they kind of had to they had established that Vaughn could only be in the night, so they just made him Vaughn. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing.
Weird choice. What a weird choice. If I had to guess, I would say it was an actor thing, like actor availability, actor, and then they figured, instead of recasting him, like we recast Zach, we'll just change the character entirely. But again, that's fine, but if you're going to do that, it better have a purpose, and it clearly has not.
Well, hopefully it has a purpose by next week.
I guess. But
next week is our season finale, so some things should happen.
I mean, I would hope. Speaking of useless characters, can we get to Nikki?
Yeah.
Oh, this is infuriating.
No, I know. We're probably infuriated for different reasons. I got really mad at Twitter today about that.
Okay, well, you tell me what you're mad at.
Oh, I got mad at Twitter just because everybody was like, "Oh, he saved her, so she should be with him." And for me, with my very progressive feminist views all the time, I'm like, no, she had a life or death experience, and she realized what she wanted out of life. So she's gonna go with the person she wants to be with. I don't think that character's written very well, and I don't understand it. But if they're writing her to have had a revelation because something horrific happened to her, that sounds pretty. That sounds like a real person thing to me. Just because the person's everybody's like, oh well, he saved you, so he wins you basically, and it's no, you don't get to win her. She gets to make her own choices in life. Correct. That being said, it was terrible material.
Yeah, correct and good point. That was not the reason to dislike this. She didn't owe Fett anything romance-wise, because that's not how romance works in the 21st century.
You don't save people and then they open their legs for you.
Yes, right. You don't. Although Dutch has already done that multiple times, but still, point taken. The problem here is that there has been little effort, and what effort there has been a disaster to make Nikki even remotely likable. And so if you're gonna go through an entire episode devoting to Fett saving Dutch, then have Fett immediately reject him, okay, but you have to understand her rationale. And there is no universe in which she would pick Nikki over Fett, because Nikki is a horrible monster person. That's the problem, is that the Nikki character is such an awful, unlovable, words I don't want to say on the podcast, as written by the show. She is terrible.
But Dutch says, she says very early, or she said they even did the preview for it, or the last time on for it.
Yeah.
She says I never wanted to love you. You're so hard to love. That's what she says to her. She's in a difficult relationship with a difficult person, and that's I don't necessarily agree.
She's not difficult. She's horrible. She's not. We've never seen even a flash of any kind of humanity out of her.
She killed a vampire to save Dutch.
Fett blew up a wall and chased Ikehurst away to save Dutch. If we want to play that game, she didn't win Dutch by saving her. Blaire, Miss Progressive.
No, I wasn't saying she won her by. I'm just saying she has humanity, because you were arguing that we've never seen her do anything human, but she saved somebody who she loved from a vampire. So that is humanity, and that is something that a person would do. That's all I'm saying. I wasn't arguing
she's an action robot. Okay, great. It's just their conversations are so lackluster, and I can't buy for 1 second that Dutch loves her, even though the show clearly wants me to, because there's nothing there.
There's chemistry.
There's not even the hint of chemistry between those two. There's just absolutely no spark, no anything. There hasn't been a single scene where I've bought that relationship for 1 second. And so all this work, the bigger problem is you've created this monstrous character in Nikki who has a 0% approval rating. No one, I will say, 0 people who watch The Strain like Nikki. Can we agree on that?
Less than Zach.
Because she's not even a child. Like, there is a 0 approval rating for Nikki. So the show has done admirable work this year making Dutch more of a real person. We agree on that. Yes. The first season, she was this computer hacker plot machine that was just cynical and dumb and part of the sort of dumb world that the show created. This season, she has unquestionably become more of a character and more of a person. So you're going to burn all that goodwill by having her immediately after being saved break up with a guy for this woman who the audience has been given absolutely no reason to understand her love for. Like, just saying, it's not an answer to have the character say, this doesn't make sense. Like, that doesn't solve the problem. It's like, I love her, but it doesn't make sense. Okay, that doesn't help. Great. You're aware of it, but it's like, you know what a better solution is? Make it make sense, show. Give me one scene where Nikki comes off as a human being. And give me some spark between those two. And if there is no spark, then maybe go in a different direction with your story and kill Nikki off like everyone knows you should have.
Yeah.
Because here's the other thing. Is Nikki is apparently gone now. So the entirety of her contribution was this, I can't even call it an arc. It was a speed bump. It's like, what was Nikki, why was Nikki brought back? Just to ruin things between Dutch and Fett? Like, that was it? That the whole purpose of that, like... Okay, so based on my understanding, again, I have not been spoiled on this, so I'm just going on my understanding. Dutch is eventually going to get... Or not Dutch. Nora is eventually going to get with Fett. Like, that's my understanding. Not you don't need to confirm or deny it. That's my... Based on purely the TV show, that's where I think it's going to go. So this would be in service of that. There are a million ways to break Dutch and Fett up that don't involve bringing back this awful character and selling out the Dutch character in the process. There are a million ways, if Fett needs to be single for Nora or anyone else, there are a million ways to get Fett single again. Including not having the relationship with Dutch in the first place.
Yes, that's very true.
Because that was a concoction of this season that the show felt the need to undo, so it brought Nikki back for the sole purpose of undoing that, and then literally rode her off in a car. Didn't even bother killing her to give us this little tiny shred of satisfaction.
I think that there may or may not, I will neither confirm nor deny your hypothesis, but I think like that is a direction that you could consider, and then another direction that you could consider is that you needed to make Dutch. I weirdly think it kind of made her likable to have to. I think the thing that's terrible is that Nikki was awful, but Dutch became a more likable character with Nikki being in the show. And that might have been a correlation as opposed to a causation. But she became more likable during this drama that was between the love triangle. I think that it's partially to facilitate. I still wholeheartedly believe that Dutch is going to die. And again, I have no idea because she's not a character in the books. I can't speak to that.
Sure.
But I believe that, she's going to see herself as able to be a sacrifice of some kind or something like that.
Yeah.
Jump in front of the bullet not actual.
Well, now she has to die now. I mean, they've wrapped up all of her stories. Her story with Fett is over. Her story with Nikki is over.
Yes.
Apparently, computers no longer exist. So she has literally no purpose on the show at this point. So they've certainly cleared the way for her to be killed and remove any possible shred of surprise from it. As we said, they could have killed her during the battle for Red Hook and had it be shocking and amazing. But no, let's go ahead and remove all the stakes.
Yeah.
And also, in the process, turn the audience on her by making us... Because what I ended on at the end of this episode is that she's mostly just dumb. Or dumb and, like, hopelessly impulsive. Because there's such a disparity between Nikki and Fett. And she looked like she was having such a good time with Fett. And he would listen to her. And they made that relationship so, like, nice in retrospect. And with Nikki, everything is miserable. And Nikki's a horrible person. And we've never seen them happy together. And it's like, and she's choosing Nikki and ruining her life. It's like, well, so she's just someone who is so controlled by her impulses. Like, she's a manic pixie nightmare girl. Like, she just, that's who she is. And it's like, well, if we're going to have that character, then no one's going to care if she dies. We're back to season 1 where it doesn't matter if she dies. There was a brief period in season 2 where it would have mattered. And if you kill her off during that time, if that's the ultimate plan, then great. That's good. That's how you kill characters off. But now we've reached the end where if she dies... What am I supposed to care about? What tie does she have to this world? She was a made-up character anyway, and all of her stories have wrapped up. So that's the... And then also, if she gets killed now, it'll be like punishment for her sins of dumping Fett. Like, then we're back to the women thing on this show, where everyone gets punished for their sins.
Right.
And so that it'll have that layer on it. It's like, just get it right once, The Strain. Just once, make the right choice.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's really... ineffective, I think, when a TV show kills off a character after wrapping up their plot.
Yes.
Like, I hate to invoke the holy name of Joss Whedon, but one of the things that Joss Whedon did so well was kill characters off in the middle of their prime or their worst time or something. Or even True Blood, frankly. Like, True Blood would kill people surprisingly and out of nowhere. Like, the spoiler alert, just the Terra death, that was smack dab in the middle of a plot, and they killed her off, and that was like really like for True Blood that was really brave. I mean, they had done it before. That was the most brave, and one of the things that in retrospect made the final season of True Blood rather enjoyable. Not I loved the Terra character, but just because they abruptly took something away, and you had to deal with the aftermath of that. You had to deal with the fallout. Whereas with Dutch, if they're going to kill her off, this is the longest draw out ever to kill a character off, where they made sure that any like paving that they had done for her character beforehand, that they made sure they put up a wall on it. Like, all right, it's done, it's over.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Strain, the Strain, just. This is so infuriating because if you're not gonna, I mean, I want to understand what happens in the writers' room when they're before a season, because every show works like you plot out how the season is going to go, like the big beats of the season, how it's all going to happen. It's like they had to, and I'm giving them credit for being human beings with brains. They had to take a look at the season and say, yo, guys, nothing happens. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. Nothing happens in a lot of TV shows. We can live with that. What we need to do is inject some human stakes. So we need to start killing people. We need to start having real, meaningful change in episodes where nothing happens. Because that's how you fix it, right? If you don't have plot elements to burn off, then you have humans to burn off. You have characters to burn off. You have characters whose stories can advance. You have stakes you can add. Like there's ways to do this. And instead, like you said, they're so petrified to mess with any of their characters that the ramp up to a character's death has to be like a red carpet walk down plot street. And we're just heading down that with Dutch. Dutch could have been killed if the goal is to kill off Dutch. And frankly, I'm not sure it is. Like, given the show's track record, it's unclear to me that even though all signs point to her being killed in the finale, it's still unclear to me that they'll actually go through with it. Because the fact that Nikki wasn't killed off, I mean, now anyone can live on the
Right.
show. Because if you were ever going to kill off a character, it would be Nikki. Even if it was just like, all the events of this episode happen the same, and then boom, surprise vampire attack, she dies. Like, even if you were just going to do that, that would have been more satisfying than her just driving off with her mom.
Right.
So, I mean, again, like, this is a show in the apocalypse. You're just going to have characters drive off. Like, Jim's wife, Sylvia, did this too. Like, she's this introduced as this sort of, I mean, she's dying, so that's one thing, but also she was like very like irrational. Even though 3 CDC experts, including her husband, were telling her that this was happening, she was like, no, it's not happening, I'm leaving forever. And she got in a car and drove off.
Yeah.
The Indian family got in a car and drove off. Yo, the strain, you're in the apocalypse, you can kill people instead of having them drive off. Can we just have a little drama? A little bit? People just drive off in cars on this show.
Yeah, but they did. Sorry, excuse me. I had coffee. Coffee makes my throat itch.
Oh.
So they set up so much. They set up so much good. Okay, sorry. They set up so much goodness that is in the books for next week, and I'm just like, next week is going to be so good, and I'm making that claim right now. That next week is going to be so good because they set up. First of all, sorry, I'm just saying, yeah, they mess up a lot, but like I'm saying that the setup that they did this week is making it all going to be worth it. And I'm putting some stakes down for this. But
okay.
The part of the books where Icors and Satrakian have to go like face off to get the book, really funny. It's scary and funny in like a really positive way, not in like an ironic or this is terrible way, but just because Icors is the sassiest Icors will ever be. And then my scene. your
scene that you have talked about since before the show started.
Yes, my scene. They showed a clip in the preview of Zach doing something that is exactly something that happens in the book, and in the scene that's super scary that I've been talking about the entire time, and I'm so excited. I was like screaming. You have no idea. I'm so happy.
No,
like,
I do have an idea because I heard you screaming.
That's true. But so the whole this sort of ties into F and Nora's story of them like having to go outside of the city and all of that. Like, I think one of the reasons I liked this episode so much is just because I was like, yes, the build up, for this thing that's going to happen. Because you're talking about fleeing the city, this moment when the characters are going to decide to flee the city, and it's the scariest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's all worth it. Is all that just, I mean. But I also hate that. I hate that we have to like put everything off. You know, it's like oh, this will be worth it if Coco's a double agent. This will be worth it if there's a big twist. This will be worth it if there's a cool scene next week. It's like, no, there should be cool scenes every week. This is a TV show that we devote an hour to every week. It's not that hard to make episodes interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's not that hard to have stuff happen. Like, I get a very strong sense that what the Strain is doing right now is killing time. I think even though it's a limited series, there is not enough material in this story to get to 5 seasons. In fact, I think there's about enough material for 2 seasons of TV in the Strain, honestly. And I think a lot of what has happened should not have been ever shot or televised. And that the show is trying to extend what is probably like a 14, 15 episode show, like a mini-series, or like a season of Fargo even, in terms of like what actually is there to tell storytelling wise, into like a 60 episode full length series. And so we get, stretches like this where just nothing is happening, where we have chase after chase that yields nothing, right. Where we have stupid love stories that sort of like just go nowhere and contribute nothing, and where it feels like the apocalypse is about third on the docket for an episode right. Like this. It's like this is a show about the end of the world. It has to feel that way. You could have certain episodes where that takes a back seat to like character growth and development, but not at the rate that the Strain has them. It feels when was the last time it felt like the end of the world was important on this show? It's always everyone's caught up in their own little world, and we're just always in these stories, and the Master hasn't done anything in God knows how long, and it's like just when was the last time the world felt threatened? It's like, what has happened since the Battle of Red Hook? Like, did the vampires lose numbers? Are the Strigoi reeling? Did they get reinforcements? Did they have to, like, convert a bunch of people? Like, what is happening with the big picture thing, which is all that matters? Mm-hmm. Like how, you know...
Well, no, I agree with you. It's one of those things, and this is interesting because I think off podcast, you and I have frequently talked about shows that shouldn't be 24-episode shows. They should be 12-episode shows because they really only have 12 episodes of story to tell, so they have to start filling everything up with dumb stuff. And I think that what The Strain is really suffering from, I think you make a good point, is that it would be a very good show like Sherlock, the way that Sherlock on the BBC is done, where it's an hour and a half long and there are 3 episodes each season. It would be very good in that format. I think a miniseries may not do it justice. Or like 3 feature-length films. Like, I'm sorry, but like this would have been a much easier story to tell in a movie form than to tell in television form. Because the story in the books, I think that they definitely could have found ways to make 12 episodes, but they found every way that wasn't the right way to make 13 episode seasons. And it's really, I mean, you've turned me on this episode. It's really unfortunate, and it makes me very unhappy as a viewer most of the time because I'm trying to like see the shining light in every moment, and then you get dredged down by this terrible material. And frankly, this terrible material includes the stuff that happened with Ichorus last week. Like, that stuff, that was terrible material. Like, yes. I think you and I came to that conclusion by the end of the episode. It's a different kind of terrible. It's not the boring kind of terrible. It's the sensationalist type of terrible. But nonetheless, they have done everything in their power this entire season not to tell, like, a story.
Well, yes, correct. There has been... I defy anyone to tell me what the A story of this season is. I really defy you. Because early on...
I have it.
Well, early on, it was coming up with the cure.
Right.
That was it. That was the A story, and that lasted for like 6 episodes.
Right. And
then it was foiled. Someone tell me what the story has been since.
It's what happens when you go back to alcoholism.
Correct. You're right.
When you have a relapse.
It's a very special Alcoholics Anonymous tape designed to scare people.
Yes.
Into not being alcoholic. Like, it's so, like, the show has so little self-awareness. Like, the conversation... But we gotta talk about the F and Nora material in this episode, too. Because who the hell cares about F and Nora at this point? Like, I had genuinely forgotten that they were an item.
Right. And what a useless reason to bring back our boy Jim.
Jim, you deserved better.
He deserves so much better than that cameo.
It's like, if you're gonna, it's like, it's not like the flashbacks were bad in and of themselves. It's just, again, they were pointless. It's like, why do I need to know more about this relationship that I haven't cared about in a full season? Like, you know, it's like F and Nora have just not been a thing. And then they have the gall to be like, to act like it's a motivating factor for Zach to not leave Zach at home alone, when they did literally that the last 2 episodes, and it was uncommented on. Like, how is that the motivating factor for getting him? And then we invent the grandparents out of thin air. Yeah. It's like, what are you doing not to set these things up?
What they did is they were like, oh man, we completely got rid of something that makes us have to leave the city.
Yeah.
So when they made that decision, they forgot that they had this really important scene that Blaire talks about all the time. That's like the most important scene in the entire book series. It's also the scariest scene. They forgot that when they decided to do this one thing in season 1, that they were going to have to find a different reason to leave the city. And what they decided was that Zach had grandparents.
Right. So the reasons they come up with, as they explain in one line of dialogue to Feraldo, is that they have to go to DC, which is what F just was, to get some kind of agent for the cure. Like, some kind of chemical agent, right? They have to do that, and maybe that's just the cover story they were giving Feraldo. Like, maybe they already have it, but it's something... F says something about mass-producing the cure. He needs to go retrieve some kind of thing. Which, if there is... I mean, really, like just a pure plot device. Just pure...
How has Feraldo not figured out that F is, like, one of the most wanted people in the world?
It's completely unclear.
And how did he get into a city council hearing?
Again,
as being one of the most wanted men in the world.
Completely unclear. I think that has dropped. that is no longer a thing. I think the bald head now is some sort of invisibility cloak that he's using, and just no one can even, like, his mugshot, he has hair, he is bald, no chance. Just no one recognizes him. He's now got a cloak of invisibility.
Hey! You know what? Let's bring a little brightness to this podcast.
Wig
it's
talk!
been very dark. Wig talk.
Wig talk is back.
The Wig cameo.
Cameo wig appearance.
I think it's also possible that Nora was wearing extensions.
Entirely.
She looked hella fine, very glamorous.
Fine. Yeah. I liked Nora in those flashbacks.
It was a good moment for Nora.
Can someone tell me what happened between flashback Nora, who was awesome and aggressive and, like, super, like, perceptive, and current Nora, who just cries all day? Like, like, the character of Nora that, even, like, in the first episode of this show...
Never introduced that way.
Was never introduced as the character who was at that press conference kicking ass and taking names. Like, why isn't that Nora? Like, what? That character had nothing in common with the Nora that we've come to know and hate. Yeah. And she was so much cooler back then, and she was hotter. It's like, why isn't she cooler and hotter now?
Well, no, she's...
She is, yeah. I'm joking. She definitely was cooler.
Yeah, definitely cooler. She had her smoky eye game was top notch.
Fire.
It was on fire.
We got lame Nora. Like, and also, and like, those flashbacks were so pointless, but I kind of liked a world where the three of them were just chilling and Jim was passing out drunk on the couch. I was like, man, that's what the show is missing. Like, if you're not going to have any action, if you're going to insist on making this show about these stupid people, then at least give us moments like that where we can, like, appreciate the camaraderie and, like the characters. Like, that was the most I've ever liked Nora. Those flashbacks is the most I've ever liked Nora, but it's all undercut because they're flashbacks. You know?
Yeah.
It was like, well, I already know who she becomes, so I can't really appreciate this fully. But it's like, if that was who Nora was all the time, man, that's such a better character. And F seemed like a human being and a person.
But that Nora was also the Nora who, like, had only just at that moment accepted, or at least by the end of the flashbacks, that she had kind of contributed to ruining somebody's marriage, and that she had, like, had an affair, like, with her boss and all that stuff. I think that, like, the Nora of the past just had a different life experience than the Nora that was with F.
Here's the thing. This is a fictional show. If they wanted to make Nora cool, they could have made her cool. They could have made one of her traits being she gets over stuff. They're fictional characters. They have the power to write her like that at any point. It's like they decided that she has to ruin F's marriage and therefore she's going to be a mopey, miserable person. They're like, oh, well, our hands are tied. It's like, no, you're not. You can write this stuff. She's a character in a story. Like, she doesn't have to be the worst. I feel like that is, like, what the strain is, both in terms of plot and characters. It's like they make something happen and they're like, oh, well, I guess we've got to make this miserable for the audience. We can't do anything about that. It's like, no, you're telling a story. You rewrite it. The character doesn't have to be awful.
Okay, one thing I did like, I'm trying really hard, man.
Yeah, no, you're doing heroic work.
I know. You're gonna totally disagree with me, because it came out of left field. But I liked a more emotional and childlike Zach. I think this is one of the first times that they've ever shown Zach act like a child to me.
Crying on the phone when his grandparents call?
Yeah. When the world is over and his mom died.
It's not like I think he's some kind of monster for doing this. Like, yeah, sure. But it's also like the ship sailed on Zach a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give him any credit for showing what I think any kid would do. It's like basic human emotion, like your grandparents call. You've been having a tough time. You had some trauma. It's like, I don't know, like, are we giving Zach credit for, like, walking now? It's like this like, I guess if we had known about the grandparents, if that was, like, a thing, if it would have been, like, more of a moment, but it's like, okay, well, we invented these grandparents, and now we're going to have them call. We're not going to hear their voices, we're just going to say they called, and then Zach's going to talk to him for 2 seconds, and then he's going to cry. It's like, are we on Zach's side now? Like, it's like, okay, well, Zach made himself a bacon sandwich for lunch. Should we all be happy for him? It's like this is just, like, life. We're just living life, and he's so clearly been relegated to just being a plot device now. Like you said, to get them out of the city. It's like he's no longer a sentient being. He's been grounded for letting his mother vampire in, and now he's been grounded to where he can only be a plot device. Like, that's all he is now. He's either not present in episodes like the last two, or he's just trying to get our main characters from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I have some thoughts, but I think that they're a little too book
Sure.
related.
It sucks, though. It sucks that you have to rely on the book.
I know. I think he was missing for 2 episodes because the kid needed some coaching, probably, on things. That's all I'm gonna say. And I think that he's got some pretty big moments coming up for him, and he needed he needed somebody to prepare him.
Maybe it was just that the audience needed to be given a Zach rest. We just needed to forget that he existed to try to reset the character a bit.
Well, and in this episode they had to make him sympathetic.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So they just made him sympathetic in the most basic way possible, which is
he's a kid crying because his mom died.
Invent loved ones and have him cry while talking to them. It's like that was the plan, and so they executed that very simple game plan, I guess, effectively. I don't know. It's like you're gonna if you're gonna turn me even a little bit on Zach, I'm gonna need more effort into it than that. Right. Crying scenes aren't gonna do it for me. You're gonna really have to come up with something.
Yeah. No, I agree. Abe finally made it to the Occido Lumen.
Oh, the Occido Lumen.
Why is it in German? I still don't know.
It's just
this ancient book in German. The German language is like 200 or 300 years old, max.
This is the real, just the of all the mountain of useless stories that the Strain has
chasing,
dumb, pointless, time filler.
Yeah.
And I want to remind you, I know you are excited because this whole Occido Lumen thing is leading to this big confrontation that is clearly going to happen, where Gus is there and Eichhorst is there, yada yada. I'm just exhausted even talking about this stupid book. This is our second book auction of the season. We had the auction scene where the priest had the book, and Abe was trying to outbid the Palmer on the book. So we have now had 2 book auctions in one season of an apocalypse show. Auctions. The most, when I think the end of humanity, I think auctions. That's what I'm really looking for. Like, this Occido Lumen thing could have been taken care of in 1 episode. Like, this has been so pathetically little material to send Abe off on this wild goose chase for so little payoff. Like, I know we're getting to this big fight scene, but to this point, my goodness, just the amount of screen time we've wasted on this dumb book that the show has spent so much time on the chase and spent no time at all on the setup. Like, no, like, why, if you've allotted 20% of the screen time this season to be devoted to the dumb book, why isn't half of that devoted to making the dumb book matter? Like, this episode, I'm genuinely asking. This episode, Abe gives a line like, if the Master gets the Occido Lumen, all is lost. It's like, well, why? Tell me functionally why that is the case, because I've watched every episode, and I cannot tell you why that's the case.
I just keep filling in information from the books, because in the books, like, the Master has a lot of scenes with various characters, including, like, one-offs with Eichhorst and the Master,
point to a scene on the show.
Where he talks about it. Right, and that's the thing.
Point to a scene on the show.
In the books, he's like, I need to get it before Satrakian gets it. Like, that's a very, like, big plot point. And in this, you're right. There's, like, you see Eichhorst sometimes being like, you better not let that book get away.
Yeah, in the first season, we had, at least once an episode, a scene where the Master was involved, or Eichhorst was involved, like, as sort of a stand-in for the Master, where they were talking about their plans. Mm-hmm. And we get that occasionally with Palmer, although it's mostly just to, like, advance Palmer and Coco's love story. But we have had so little idea of what the Master's motivations are this season. He's appeared in, like, 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, he's the bad guy of the series. Oh. And we don't know what's happening with him.
No. I don't know about you. I would love to talk predictions about the finale, because I have a prediction that has a lot to do with what we were just talking about. Which is,
you go.
Okay. This is a big prediction. I think that you and I were just so severely wrong about Coco, like, in every way, shape, and form. And she's actually going to become one of the big bads.
Really?
Yeah, I think I kind of figured that out, and I'm putting that information together. She's not a character that exists in the books, but I'm putting that information together just based on the projection of the plot from this week's episode.
Okay, let's go lightning. Let's go lightning round here.
Okay,
lightning. I love that idea. Lightning round. First, let's talk predictions for the finale based on each set of characters who have been grouped together and their story. And you tell me what you think will happen, and if there's a difference, what you want to happen.
Okay.
Coco and Palmer.
Okay. What I think will happen without using book knowledge.
Yes.
This is hard.
Coco's not a book character.
Coco's not a book character. I think that Palmer is going to find himself in a lot of trouble with this auction business. Mm-hmm. And Coco is going to prove to be a better or at least on par partner for the master.
Yes. Okay. That's good. That's exactly what I'm thinking now that you brought this up. I think Coco kills Palmer. I think. Well, no, hold on. I don't think that. I hope that because this is the strain. So, if this show had any sense of how to do stuff, they want to give us a real shocking finale. Palmer barely escapes the auction business. They're in the car ride home. Coco slits his throat. Yeah. And Coco takes over the relationship with the master.
Right. She gets married to him overnight or something.
Yes.
Takes over the relationship.
Yes. Takes over his fortune. You give me that, and that storyline is 20% redeemed for the season.
Just 20%, huh?
That's as far as I can go because it's been such garbage. But it'll be 20% redeemed if you give me that.
Yes.
What I think will happen is not that because the strain is never that cool. What I think will happen probably is that Palmer barely survives. Coco probably barely survives, and we go on business as usual. Okay, let's talk about Gus and Angel. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
Okay, this doesn't happen in the books, so I am a free agent. They are going to go to the auction as, I guess, is that a third party? Because Satrakian has the Ancients, and does Quinlan have the Ancients? I don't know. I can't figure out if Quinlan has his own money or if he has the Ancients' money. And I can't tell if Gus is working for Quinlan or if Gus is working for the Ancients.
My interpretation is that Quinlan is loosely affiliated with the Ancients, because he did go to the Ancients at the start. So he's clearly on the Ancient side. I think they are uneasy allies. Mm-hmm. And I think Gus has been employed by Quinlan now.
Okay.
So Gus is... I don't think Gus has a direct relationship with the Ancients since the whole Vaughn business concluded.
Right. So then Gus, I think, is going to get his hands on the Occido Lumen. I think Hugh will be the person to get the Occido Lumen, and he'll send it with Angel off.
Yeah.
That's my prediction about that. And that is not based on any book knowledge whatsoever. That is just, that's what I think, projection of the show, that Angel has been protecting Gus this whole time, and Gus is going to have to face off with some dudes, whether from the other good guy side. He's gonna have to face off against them, and he's gonna kind of what is, I don't know the football term, but he passes it off to Angel. Angel's gonna get away.
Gonna send a lateral over. Yeah. So you're predicting. What are you predicting happens to Gus then?
I think that the finale is actually gonna end with them. Without us knowing what.
Okay.
With Gus, there are other characters I think we will know what happens to them.
Okay.
But with Gus, I think that there's going to be a cliffhanger. I'm not sure what that cliffhanger is, but Gus is the only character where it makes sense for there to be a cliffhanger.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what's going to go on with them. I feel very strongly that neither Gus or Angel is going to die though.
Oh.
So this episode, this finale, I just don't think if they killed Angel off now, that'd be a real waste of that character. Because we spent a lot of time setting him up. It would just in this episode.
Yeah. No. I don't think he's gonna die in the next episode. But I will say that all of the events that take place in the final scene in the book cannot possibly happen in this season. So I have literally no idea.
Okay.
Because the final part of the book 2 takes place in a setting that has not been established yet. And if they went to that setting next week, then I would be like, that was what you could have been building up to.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So what do you think happens with F and them in this episode?
I can't talk about that.
Okay, you can't talk about that.
Because F is absent from the scene in question that I'm always thinking about, so it's very interesting to me that F is in this scene.
Yeah.
I do have, this is, not based on book knowledge, this is based on the projection of the show. I kind of think Nora might be killed off.
Really?
Yeah, because she got another job, first of all. Mia Marsha got a new job. Yeah, she's like on Scandal or something. One of those. All those shows are the same to me. Those law shows. So she just became a full-time cast member on a different show, and I don't know if she can balance both of those things. So I think that just based off of real world stuff. But then I also think like with Nora and F and Zach like going on their adventure, like there has to be some kind of terrible thing, right? Like beyond the terrible thing that I already know about. Yeah, there has to be an additional terrible thing. So if not killed, horrifically maimed or something, like I think Nora's in trouble, but like at the same time, like that would really alter everything based on the books, because that's not what happens at the end of book 2.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, well, I didn't even think about the possibility of Nora being killed, but the casting thing is an interesting point. I think there is also a possibility, as is this show's tradition, that she rides off in a car with Zach, or that she just stays, just goes off in a car, basically, and doesn't get killed, and then makes like a random appearance later, like a guest appearance in like a future season.
Right. It is Scandal, by the way. I wasn't just
okay. Yeah, she's in the Shondaverse now.
Everybody's lost once they're in the Shondaverse. Yeah. People don't come back from that.
It's like a wormhole. So yeah, it'll be interesting if she actually returns to the show. I hadn't even thought about that, but maybe that will have some sort of impact on the storytelling of the strain.
Yeah, and again, that's not in the books, so I have no reason to base that off of any information from the books. I just, anything's possible once Shonda gets her to get a hold on you.
So I kind of hope that other actors on the strain start getting other jobs so that the show is forced to kill off characters. I feel like that might grease the wheels a bit as far as the plot is concerned.
So seeing as nobody has died in a very long time.
Yeah, well, this episode we got the mayor.
That doesn't count.
I know he definitely doesn't count, and I was going to say that, but I mean, people will say, oh, the mayor, but it's like, yeah, okay, great,
not a main character death. That's a
tertiary character, yeah,
D character at best.
Yeah, also killed off so unceremoniously.
So unceremoniously. All right, what about you? Do you have any predictions?
Oh gosh, I mean, for Nora and F, it's hard to. It's hard to even think about it, like, because I mean, what I want to happen, of course, is something major. I want the F character to really spread his wings and fly like he did on that train. So I want him to really re-embrace being a cross between James Bond and Jason Bourne, and I feel like if it takes Nora's death to do that, I guess what I want is F to lose everything. Mm-hmm. If he loses Nora through one means or another, and then he loses Zach, hopefully through Zach getting turned finally after this long walk towards that seemingly inevitable conclusion, which is that Kelly eventually gets him. I mean, I don't know anything about the books, but that would seem to be where we're headed. So, I mean, I kind of want F to end this season at a point where he's lost it all, where there's nothing left for him. He is now just going into I don't care mode. I have no earthly attachments. Things are about to get blown up. Right. That's where I want F to end this season, so we can enter next season basically wearing a leather jacket with like with grills like cream. Like I want F to go like full on just apocalyptic villain. I want him to look like a Mad Max character.
Yes,
that's what I want in my F.
That leather jacket will definitely just have like lots of different slots for flasks.
Yes.
Every type of booze, whatever he's feeling, right? Like.
Oh yeah, it'll be like one of those old traveling salesman jackets where they've got like all their products in various pockets in the thing. Like that'll be F.
That's exactly what it'll be. Just I'm feeling vodka today.
Yes. And he will be referred to simply as the Alchemist.
Oh gosh. All right.
That's my future for F.
Oh good. That sounds like a bright, shiny future.
It really does.
All right. Well, before we get all wrapped up, there weren't any Strain Bingo winners this week, right?
No, it wasn't a big Strain Bingo week. I think, as we're moving, we did that bingo card like 9 weeks ago. so we've moved past the point where Dutch is a hacker. There are a couple squares that could be updated, but honestly, like the season's about over,
Although we did get tweeted at by the actor who plays Icorse.
Richard Sammel.
Yep, Richard
tweeting at
Samuel.
us. Shout out to the Strain Addicts, which you can
Yes.
find on Facebook and their Twitter account at Strain Addicts, who set up a Q&A with Richard Samuel, which led to us being tweeted at.
Yeah, we asked him what his favorite square on the Strain bingo card was, and he said his favorite square was Apocalypse Sex.
Yes! Perfect Icarst answer.
Perfect Icarus answer. What about fan mail? I think our good friend Mary sent us something very special.
Yeah, so based on our last episode, which, as I'm sure you all remember, was the fan fiction episode, where Blaire improvised her fan fiction and I wrote out a tome of fan fiction. Well, our friend Bat Mary, who you also might remember as having appeared on this podcast as our first ever bingo winner, took it upon herself to write her own fan fiction.
Without ever having seen season 1 of the show.
We should remind people that Mary has not watched a lot of episodes of The Strain and may be sketchy on the details. Did not stop her from basically rewriting the plot of the last episode. She wrote this after she saw the episode.
The pineapple episode.
The pineapple, yes, will forever be known as the pineapple episode. And she rewrote the plot. Thankfully, free of any kind of sexual assaults, which is nice.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
Everybody appreciates
for doing us that kindness. Guess what? Hers was better than the actual shows. No big surprise. But I'm going to read a very brief snippet of what is a very long scene that I believe Mary is posting to fanfic.net.
Yes, and I've been retweeting the tweet on the Strain podcast handle, so
yes.
At the Strain Pod, look for it. I'll be tweeting out Mary's fanfic.
And you can follow her at BatMary to keep apprised on all of her fanfic adventures. So this very brief exchange that I'm going to read takes place after Dutch has been caught. She has run away, just like she did in the episode, but she's been caught by Icarst. Dutch finally reaches the bottom, only to discover it was a dead end. Icarst catches up a few minutes later and sasses her some. He then drags her back up the stairs. As her screams ring out, the Scooby Gang realize that they are in the wrong stairwell. Fett begins to hit the bricks with a small metal pole as the others look on in shame. After what feels like an hour, Fett makes a small hole in the wall and turns toward Nora. Boom, boom, he says simply, also a line from my fanfiction. Nora runs over and wakes F up. And the three of them hide while the wall explodes. They run up the correct stairs to find Icarst holding the severed head of Dutch Velders.
Wow.
Yeah, you can read the whole thing at marysfanfic.net page. Suffice to say that I enjoy this a lot more than both that episode and this episode.
Yeah.
Mainly because Mary killed characters.
And that needs to happen.
If you'll remember from my fanfic, I killed literally every character, so that's clearly where my tastes lie.
Yes. We also got fan mail from Paul Clark. For those of you who may or may not remember, he's our pandemic specialist. Anytime something sciencey happens on the Strain, he likes to give us a heads up on how realistic of a portrayal it was. He really enjoyed the conference that F and Nora met at. He thought that was a very realistic portrayal of a medical conference, and he said that the way that they were speaking to one another was the real way that scientists would speak to one another, which is something that doesn't always happen on the Strain, so that's good. Although he did notice that the conference, which is titled the Pandemics and Infectious Disease Conference of 2005, could not have been possible because the first time that a conference like that was ever held was in 2010.
Okay.
Yes. He also pointed out that Justine Feraldo having a fight with Palmer about how much money he spent on military weapons was incredibly low. That is actually a $300 million facility is paltry. That would be nothing.
I'm not an expert, but when she quoted that it cost $30 million to build a military base, I was like, wait a minute.
Yes. Paul Clark told us that those actually cost about $1 billion each, for anybody who's interested. And then his final note that I thought was very interesting was I was actually super excited about the way that Dutch was portrayed with her trauma. because it seemed like, oh, she's somebody who's gone through some stuff.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
she's like, Rudigamentes is doing a really good job with that. He said that was great, but if you think about it, that was countered immediately by Coco recovering and being totally okay with everything that happened to her. After being shot with a rifle, Coco has no trauma from being shot, or from being fed by a vampire, or from sleeping with an evil guy.
No. I was having fun with this on Twitter because Coco's mental state is a real mystery right now.
Yeah.
She seemed so chill with everything that's gone on that I feel like we missed about 15 scenes of her being like, tell me again what just happened.
Tell me why I'm not dead.
Yeah.
Yes. But like me, Paul thought that this was one of the better episodes of The Strain.
Yeah.
Even though, as you could tell by the rest of this episode, Kyle talked me down a little bit.
As always.
Well, hey, I've talked you up a couple times. So,
Of course.
I still stand that I thought this was one of my favorite episodes from the season. Maybe not my absolute favorite, but one of my favorites. And I'm glad that Paul Clark agrees with me.
What's funny is I read Paul's email and this is what always happens, which is I tend to think of episodes the opposite of the way that he does, like overall. But I agree with all his points when he emails us, and which is interesting because I just feel like we weight different factors differently. Because for me, what the real problem with this episode is contextual in that. The episode, on its own merits, is actually mostly fine. Like, it's dumb, but The Strain is always dumb. It does a bad job of portraying the apocalypse, but The Strain always does a bad job of portraying the apocalypse. That's sort of like the baseline for this series, and I've learned to live with that since season 1. Like, that's not it didn't do anything especially egregiously dumb that The Strain doesn't do on a weekly basis. The problem is, like, it's been like 5 weeks in a row now since something happened. And there's a cumulative effect to that, for me at least. Like, when we do week after week of nothing episodes, where it's just like, I don't even have a sense of where we are in the apocalypse, I don't even have any kind of sense of forward movement, there's no momentum at all, there's no story, there's no A story right now to the season. Like, every week that we go without that, just to me, builds and builds and builds. And this is the week where it's the penultimate episode. We needed to get something set in motion for the finale, and it's another freaking auction. You know,
Yeah.
it's like really that's like there was no setup for this auction, by the way. Like it's like they could have introduced that 4 episodes ago, and it would have been the exact same story point. Like there's just like what have we been building towards? Like I don't know. The Strain tricks me every time into thinking that when it's telling like 10 different stories across 3 episodes that somehow they're going to tie them all together into some bigger story, and every single time the Strain disappoints. Like it's not doing that. It's just throwing stuff at the wall, and it just these stories are like it just feels like they go through the book with a highlighter and they say like, oh, gotta have this, and then next page, oh, gotta have that, and then each episode is the result of like checking off those highlighted passages and being like, oh, we filmed the scene that marks this highlighted passage. It's like that to me is what the Strain feels like. There's no thought given to coherence. There's no thought given to the season-long stories. There's no thought given to anything except the episode at hand. And even that is misplaced. Like even when they just focus on the week at hand, it's like last week, where it's like kind of an isolated episode because much of it takes place in a hotel. It's like even then they screw it up, and they do something really egregiously wrong. You know, in that case, it was all the Dutch stuff, and so it's like they can't. They're wrong-headed, but in their wrong-headedness, they're also wrong. Like they're actually like they're bad at being wrong. Which is just amazing to me. It's like I just don't come across shows that get things this wrong on so many levels. And I still freaking like it because it's vampires and it's the apocalypse and it does enough right, and it's an amazing premise and like a cool world, and I'm a sucker for like the world is ending stuff. It's just I just want it to be better. Just be better, The Strain.
Oh,
Why can't it be better?
This episode is going to go down in history. This episode of our podcast, not this episode of the show, is going to go down in history of the very sad Kyle coming to terms with the fact that he's watching a really bad TV show. I think that's what this exercise has been.
I think so. I think that was here. Strain, take note. That was my emotional arc this episode. Maybe you could take a few pointers and work on that for some of your characters. But yeah, it's just. I mean, I've said. I feel like I proclaimed on the podcast that this is like. I said last week. I said the show was incompetent, which was mean but also accurate. But it's like I just wanted to, just get better. Like it can't be that hard. It can't be as hard as it makes it look.
I think it has too many moving pieces.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of shows that do that struggle. I was talking about True Blood earlier. True Blood is a show that fell apart entirely because it had too many moving pieces.
Right.
It didn't focus. It didn't decide where it wanted to have its focus. So it was just all over the place all the time by the time it ended. Final season of True Blood was pretty good. But my point being that like the strain really needs to focus. And if it does follow the general direction of book 3, then it will be hyper-focused next season. This season, too many moving parts, too many added characters, too many changes that they wanted to make, as we were talking about Quinlan earlier and all of that. Just trying too hard to be inventive with something that was already a pretty good story. You can obviously always take liberties. You should always add characters, especially if you're lacking a female character or if you're lacking people of color or anything like that. You should always make sure that you're being as representative in your show as you can, especially if it's the New York apocalypse. Women and people of color are going to be there. Right. But that being said, there's a lot of just storytelling choices that they made that they didn't need to make. And it's just really, really unfortunate. But if it decides to, kind of turn itself around for season 3, and follow the books a little bit more closely, obviously with some drastic changes based on some stuff that's happened this season, then it will be more focused and more in line. But it's also kind of proven to us that it can't do that, so I shouldn't anticipate that.
Right.
But I will say that the final book is just much more focused on a specific set of characters. That's what I will say there.
I have a change that the show could have made right off the bat that would have, I think, fixed these problems and also enraged book readers.
Oh.
Which is, because it seems like a lot of these issues are from exactly what you said, which is the show has too many characters, and it seems weirdly beholden to them. Like, it refuses to shuffle characters.
It won't kill anybody.
It just won't kill anybody. It's a show about killer vampires, and it won't kill anybody. But what this show could have done is axed the Dutch Velders character, which would have axed the Nikki character, which would have axed Nikki's mom. Like you kill off the whole tree there. Could have, and then could have instead made Fett a woman. And made that a female character and had the kick-ass character action hero of the show be a woman. And I think that would have solved almost all of these issues. And it would have certainly required rewrites of book things, because obviously, but just fundamentally, because the problem is F is the ostensible hero of the show, who's proven to be sort of incompetent, but is still kind of the hero of the show. He's the headliner of the show, certainly. He's a man. Citrakian is the most knowledgeable character. He's a man. Fett is the action hero. He's a man. Nora is a useless crybaby. She's a woman. And so they have to introduce the Dutch character, so they, of course, make her a supermodel who's the world's greatest hacker, which is just like, okay. And then Icarus is the coolest villain. He's a man. The Master is I guess, male. I mean, who knows? But he was certainly inhabiting male bodies. So all the cool roles on this show are filled by men, and the women they have added are Coco, who is a personalityless robot who's in love with a senior citizen, and Feraldo, who started off really cool. We both enjoyed her, and now is a crazy person who's becoming Hitler. And then Nora, who was apparently super awesome in 2005, and is now the lamest member of the cast. Yeah. So it's like okay, like there's your imbalance. It's not a numbers imbalance; it's a coolness imbalance. And if you take the coolest character on the show, which I think almost everyone would agree is Fett, and you make that character a woman, all problems solved. You no longer have to feel like you need to meet a quota of female characters, and maybe you don't need to introduce Coco, and maybe you don't need to introduce Dutch, and maybe you could tell a more condensed story, that rather than, having all this nonsense.
Yeah, well, another thing that they did, and I know you've read book 1 after you finished the first season, is they made Nora very different.
Yes.
She was in the books, she's wicked smart, she's a good companion, she is emotional, but she's dedicated, but she's not necessarily a surrogate mom. She's
right.
not she's not all these things. She is a protector, she is a guardian of Zach. But she's smart and tactful and goes out of her way to be helpful. And in this version of the show, I have really liked it when they have shown those features of her, and I have liked it when she has been able to wield a sword and be a badass and decapitate vampires. But the rest of the time that they show her is that, as you're saying, like she's crying or she's sad, she's making sad eyes. So I got chills when you first said they should have made Fett a woman, because my instinctual reaction was to say no. But my secondary reaction was like, yes,
right.
That would have been great, because they just decided to write the worst parts of Nora as her most obvious parts in the TV show, as opposed to where she has a lot more dynamic of a character in the books.
And fundamentally, Nora will always be F's assistant. That's the relationship between those two characters that's never going to change
In the show.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. In the book, you're right, at least in book 1, I'm sure it continues, but that character has a lot more shading. And he's honestly more reminiscent of the character we saw in the flashbacks briefly in this episode, where she is challenging F and more of a, someone who is actually smarter than he is. He might be the golden boy, and he might be very capable, but she is incisive and critical. And, like all those things that is just utterly absent in the TV show. Just utterly absent. Like, that is not... Those traits have not showed up since like the very first episodes, and even then only in like echoes. And so it's like, she's fundamentally F's assistant, and then Coco is fundamentally Palmer's assistant. And so it's like your female characters are all in these secondary roles, and I think like the reason that's a bigger problem than just sort of a diversity issue, is that it's caused the show to spiral out with all these stories. And it's like, that's why we have so much time this season devoted to Coco and Palmer. That's I can't imagine that's present in the books, because Coco isn't a character.
Right.
So it's like, why are we spending time on this romance story between these two characters? Like, well, they needed to figure out a way to have a female character be in a major role. And you look at what The Walking Dead did with the Michonne character, where she became like the fan favorite character. She's the action hero of that show. She's the fan favorite. She has a near 100% approval rating on that show. It's like, that's the Fett character. That's who that is. It's the female kick-ass character who everyone loves and who everyone rallies behind. And I trust me, I love Kevin Durant's performance, and I think he's done great with that character, and I don't know what I would do without Boom Boom. But if it would have just solved all the show's problems. And like usual, they didn't have the balls or the foresight to make that decision. And so they're left with the mess that they have now. And
they didn't have the ovaries, Kyle. They didn't have the ovaries.
Yes, correct. You're right. My apologies.
No, I'm 100% behind you. And I didn't think that I would be, because that Fett character is so near and dear to my heart from 19-year-old Blaire. What was I? Maybe I was like 18. I'm not sure how old I was when I first read that character, but he's near and dear to my heart. All right. For our listeners, next week we will be covering the season finale of season 2. In the coming weeks, make sure that you look out for an episode that we'll be publishing, maybe a week later, maybe 2, after Kyle gets the opportunity to read the second book, so that we can discuss the differences. And if you want to go back to our first season, we discuss our final episode from the first season of our show is about the differences between the first book and the first season, and we will do the same thing here. They are spoiler heavy, so only go in if you want to hear it.
Yes.
Don't forget that we have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/The Strain Podcast. We also have an Instagram, which is The Strain Pod, just like our Twitter handle. This wraps up our 27th episode of The Strain Podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our podcasts at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to the show and also rate us. Follow the show on Twitter at @TheStrainPod, and Kyle and I at KyleLovesTV and at BlaireLovesTV. Send us your fan mail at thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, tvbinges.com, to find and join in on our monthly binges and create your own. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.